Dirtle Magic! Hello and welcome back. You can follow our post on Twitter and Facebook at DirtleMTG to stay up to date on our latest videos and other posts, and you can join a more robust discussion about Casual Commander at our blog, TheDiceBag.blog. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this content to help the channel and the blog grow. Another way you can support the channel, though, is through our affiliate links in the description below. If you're looking for single sealed product or gaming accessories to protect all of that glory, please consider clicking the links in the description. Now, grab some spells, it's time to dirtle. Hello. Today we are going to try and fly high with Kangee, the Sky Warden. Our opponents today are Admiral Beckett Brass, Nekusar the Mindraiser, and Sachi, daughter of Sashiro. Nekusar wins the die roll and starts the game with an island into play. This is followed by a Library of Lang. Sachi plays a forest. I receive an island for my turn, play a plains, and pass. Beckett plays a swamp and casts Forsworn Paladin. Nekusar plays a Tainted Peak and then casts Swiftfoot Boots. Sachi drops a forest and then casts Elvish Visionary, drawing themselves a card. Egondril Castle is revealed on my turn, and I drop it onto the battlefield. Beckett finds a Memorial to Genius on their side of the table. They go to attacks and swing the Paladin into the Nekusar player, dealing 1 and passing. Nekusar plays a Zet Boilerworks and returns the island to their hand after tapping it for mana. They pass the turn without spending the mana on anything. Sachi comes upon a Field of Ruin on their turn, and they pass. I get Aerial Assault, and I drop an island. I want to keep the Nimble Obstructionist in hand, so I pass. Beckett activates their Forsworn Paladin to make a treasure. Nekusar replays their island, and then casts Fevered Visions, which is a card I very much like in my Niv deck. Wayfarer's Bauble then hits the field. Moving to the end step, Visions triggers for the first time, drawing the Nekusar player a card. Blighted Woodland enters the battlefield on Sachi's turn. They then cast their commander. Visions triggers for them at their end step, and they get a card and take 2. Archangel of Tithes is drawn on my turn. I drop a plains and cast it. I pass, draw 2, and take 2. Beckett casts Darksteel Ingot on their turn. Going to attacks, the Paladin swings into Nekusar, dealing 1. At the end of turn, another card, another 2 damage. Nekusar's turn sees another island into play. Wayfarer's Bauble is activated and sacrificed, and they grab a swamp. Basalt Monolith comes into play afterward. Sachi and a forest comes into play, followed by Concordant Crossroads. Everything gains the haste. Instill Energy is then enchanted to the Elvish Visionary, and mana starts to get a little out of hand. Primal Command bellows to the stack, and the modes are put a non-creature object on top of their owner's library and tutor for a creature from their own deck, which is Patron of the Orochi. Nullmage Shepherd is then cast. To the end step, and again, a card and 2 damage. My turn brings me Heliod's Intervention. I play an island and decide to cast my commander. I pass with no attacks, and gain a Skycat Sovereign at the end of turn, and discard my Aerial Assault. Beckett plays a swamp, and then casts Kosar Captain. They gain a treasure, and go to combat. The Paladin swings into Sachi, and the Kosar into Nekusar, dealing 1 and 2 respectively. Temple of Epiphany is dropped on Nekusar's turn, and they scry 1. Mindstone then enters the battlefield. Nekusar the Mindraiser then comes into play to threaten the table. They draw a card at the end of turn. To Sachi, and we have the first Nekusar triggers of the game. Sachi goes down to 33. They begin tapping their shamans for mana and cast Patron of the Orochi. They then cast Llanowar Empath, scrying 2, and reveal a jungle basin off the top. Throne the Last Troll enters the battlefield, and Patron is activated to untap all green creatures and all forests. The mana train begins again, and Gigantomancer is cast. This is followed by Recycle. To combat, and the Patron swings into the Nekusar player, and they take 7, going down to 29. At the end of the turn, Visions triggers, but only Nekusar deals damage, bringing the Sachi player down to 32. My turn brings me an island and a Pilgrim's Eye. I play the island, and then cast Skycat Sovereign. I move to combat and swing the Sovereign into the Sachi player and Kangee into Nekusar. Kangee triggers, and my flyers get a 2-0 bonus on the attack. Damage is good, bringing Nekusar down to 24 and Sachi down to 27. In the second main, I cast Restoration Angel. When it enters, I blink the Sovereign to essentially untap it and pass. I draw Ristic Study and take 2, going down to 31. To the Admiral, and they draw 2 and take 2. They play an island and cast the Sword of Hearth and Home. It gets equipped to the Paladin. In combat, said Paladin takes the sword to the Sachi player, and the damage is good. It triggers, and the Beckett player grabs a mountain and blink the Nekusar for a new shiny treasure. They pass and take 2 damage while gaining a card. 2 Nekusar and a Devastation Tide is cast. The table gets their stuff bounced. Mindstone comes back into play, and they also recast Basalt Monolith. Izzet Signet finishes the mana artifacts for the turn, and Swiftfoot Boots drops back into play, and they pass. Sachi plays a Forest on their turn, their commander re-enters, and so does the Concordant Crossroads. Elvish Mystic comes back down, and then the Instill Energy enchants it again. They tap the Elvish Mystic for mana, activate Instilled Energy, and they create more mana by tapping it again, and then cast Thrawn the Last Troll. They then activate the Field of Ruins. Izzet Blowerworks gets blown up, and everyone gets a basic land. I grab a Plains. My turn comes around, and I have a pretty full grip at this point. I play a Hallowed Fountain untapped, taking 2. Because I have to discard later, I take some time to think about my options. I cast the Angel of Sanctions, and when it enters, I exile Sachi, who goes back to the command zone. I then cast Skycat Sovereign. In combat, I swing the Angel into Sachi and the Sovereign into Nekusar. Damage is good, and Sachi goes down to 21 and Nekusar to 22. At the end of the turn, I discard Pilgrim's Eye and the Archangel of Tithes. Beckett's turn has an Underground River enter the battlefield. Darksteel Ingot then comes back into play, and so does the Nekusar Captain, making them another treasure. They crack the treasure, and then cast Ruthless Knave. 2 attacks, and the Knave swings into Sachi and the Nekusar into Nekusar. They connect, and Sachi goes down to 17 and Nekusar to 20. Nekusar plays a Swamp. They then recast their commander, and equip the boots to it. Teferi's Puzzle Box enters the battlefield, which is going to complicate some things. To Sachi's turn, and Nekusar and the Puzzle Box trigger. The Sachi player puts 9 cards on the bottom of their library, drawing 9, and therefore taking 9. They go down to 6. They play a Forest and cast Elvish Piper. It is activated, and a Sage of Ancient Lore enters the battlefield. It draws the Sachi player a card, and they take another damage. Tajiru Preserver enters, and the Sachi player passes. I gain Winds of Abandon on my turn, which sadly gets puzzled away. I end up taking 9 damage during the upkeep and draw step, going down to 19 and drawing a new hand. Unfortunately, I misclick where Kangee goes, and it goes into my deck with the other cards. It's a sadness. I play a Sea of Clouds and cast Yorion Sky Nomad. It enters and I blink out the Angel of Sanctions. I cast Arcane Signet, and then cast Flicker Wisp, blinking out one of my Ions for mana. I then go to combat and swing all of my creatures into Nekusar, and they connect. Nekusar goes down to 10. To the end step, and Flicker Wisp and Yorion trigger. My Ion comes back into play untapped, and I exile the Puzzle Box with the trigger from the Angel. Beckett's turn rolls around, and cards are drawn and damage taken. They take some more damage to have the Blood Crypt come into play untapped. They cast Stealth Mission on the Knave, giving it 2 1/1 counters, and it cannot be blocked this turn. They go to combat and swing the Knave into Nekusar. Nekusar player can't block, and Beckett casts the mighty Embercleave. Nekusar packs it in response. The Embercleave comes into play and gets equipped to the Knave. Forsworn Paladin is then cast during the second main, and the Beckett player passes. To Sachi's turn, and they recast their commander. Elvish Piper is activated, and the Trolls of Tel Jalad come into play. Instill Energy untaps the Elvish Mystic, and they cast Genesis Wave for 13. Woodfall Primus, Reclamation Sage, Obzon Beastmaster, and Seedborn Muse enter the battlefield, along with 2 forests. The Primus ETB nabs the Sword of Hearth and Home, and the Rex Sage ends up targeting my Arcane Signet, but they decide not to destroy it. Reach of Branches also goes into the graveyard from the wave, and triggers multiple times but isn't returned to hand. They cast a Gruul Beastmaster, and move to combat. Every new creature goes to combat, and the Gruul Beastmaster triggers, giving Seedborn Muse a +3 boost to their power. Everything is coming at me, so I respond with a rapid hybridization against the Woodfall Primus. It has Persist, and so comes back to the battlefield and blows up my Arcane Signet. I block the Gruul Rage Beast with my Angel, destroying it in combat, and take the remaining 9 damage, going down to 10. My turn rolls around with another Plains. I then cast Mystic Remora, hoping for some card draw later. I double check that none of Sachi's creatures have reach, and activate the Skycat Sovereign to make a Flying Kitty token. Facing lethal damage, the Sachi player cycles a Tranquil Thicket, looking for an answer. I go to combat and swing the Skycat Sovereign into the Sachi player. They activate the Elvish Piper and put an Eternal Witness into play, choosing to return the Primal Command. The Sachi player laments that the command isn't instant speed, which is something I can sympathize with, and they go down to just lethal damage. To Beckett's turn, and they recast their Sword of Hearth and Home. Mr. Grimoire triggers, and I gain a card. In response, I cast Negate on the sword, and it gets countered. To combat, and the Paladin and the Knave swing at me. I activate the Sovereign in response, and create a K token, which I use to block the Knave and let the Paladin through, taking 1 damage and going down to 9. In the second main, Vorpal Sword gets cast, and I'm sad I don't have any more mana up for my remaining counterspell. To my turn, and I visit the Temple of Enlightenment. Mr. Grimoire also triggers, and I pay the 1 to keep it in play. The card I draw for the turn is Attempsis All-Seeing. I move to combat, and swing the Sovereign, Yorion, and the Wisp into the Beckett player. Before damage, I create another 2 K tokens to boost my defenses and make the Sovereign hit harder. In response, the Beckett player casts Aetherize, and I respond with a Lofty Denial, which successfully counters the spell. The Remora triggers, and I draw an Angel of the Dire Hour. With responses done, damage is good, and the Beckett player goes down to 12. Moving to Beckett's turn, they move straight to combat and swing with everything. I assign the Ks to block the Paladin and 1 to block the Knave. My Angel blocks the Nekusar, and the Beckett player activates the Paladin to boost the power of the Nekusar by 2. My Angel and 2 Ks go down, and I take no damage. In the second main, Azure Fleet Admiral comes into play, and the Beckett player becomes the Monarch. They pass the turn and draw a card at the end step. To my turn, and Mr. Grimoire triggers, and I pay the 2 to keep it in play. I draw a Warden of Evos Isle, and I cast it. In combat, I swing with all my available creatures that can, and bring Beckett down to -1. Good game to my opponents. Flying is very good combat-related ability, and Kangee only cares that your creatures have flying. Good on flying and defense, this version of Kangee is thankfully not necessarily key to make the deck function, which we found out on accident. I'll see you next time for some more casual commander play.